Good afternoon. This is the third video in a series, Living in Novueval Times. The first was an introduction. The second presented 5 topics I think are the most relevant to the decline and slow collapse of civilization we're experiencing. And that is 4 variables that influence what we're going through and how to prepare for what's ahead. The 4 variables are environmental destruction, cultural decay, economic deterioration, and political disintegration. I covered the environment briefly last episode, but I'd like to note that the evidence for the damage we've done by contributing to climate change can be seen by extreme weather events and their damage, such as Hurricane Ida in Louisiana and New York, the drought and wildfires in California and the rest of the West, and the Midwest droughts, and the cold snap in Texas last winter. As if ocean acidification and coral bleaching and a dozen other ongoing factors weren't evidence enough. With the severely reduced crop yields and displaced persons and whole communities because of these events, we're well on our way to becoming a third world nation if this continues. That, along with the cultural, economic, and political factors, will be addressed as events develop. I'll also go back in time to analyze what led us to this point, so we may know how to behave responsibly to avoid further complications. As I'll be making the next episode about cultural decay, I'll preface it by saying we are already seeing the beginnings of mass psychosis, that society as a whole is crazy and not doing things in its best interests. If, for example, the people of the 1940s responded to the threat of World War II the way we responded to this pandemic, we'd all be speaking Germanese right now. Since this series could be construed as a dreary doom and gloom narrative of how horrible things will be, I want to jump right into what you can do to prepare, given my take on it. Whatever happens, one's view of events is more important to the individual than the event itself. I'm going to focus on mental outlook, but concerning material supplies, the most important things are, more or less in order of importance, water, food, regulating body temperature, communication, medical supplies, and shelter and/or a vehicle, depending on your situation. Regardless of what anyone thinks of my opinion concerning anything I've covered so far, back in late 2019, I started gathering supplies for the hurricane season here in Florida, a perfectly rational thing to do, and within just a couple of months, when people started panicking over the mixed messages they were getting about the virus and their mistrust of government competence, shelves were starting to empty and there was a freak out over, for example, no more toilet paper. Between the scarcity, the horrendous messaging from supposed leaders, and shelter in place and essential workers only, there was a psychological meltdown in this country, the likes of which I had never seen, but I looked around and I thought, 15 rolls of toilet paper, paper towels, masks. I do some woodworking, so I already had masks. A month's worth of food, candles, yeah, I'm good. Just prepping for hurricane season gave me a peace of mind many others couldn't enjoy, and of course, humans being what they are, and the toilet paper industry, for example, being geared more for commercial than domestic use, was not prepared for a shelter in place, and as supplies shrank, people hoarded, and others suffered from the lack. Insanity on both ends. And I'll cover my take on the sociopathology of the enough is not enough mentality that culture, and especially government and the elites, endeavor to thrust upon the masses in future videos. It will be an ongoing motif that instilling a mindset of enough is not enough on a populace is a terrible long-term strategy for any group seeking to control that populace. Be aware, I don't subscribe to theories like one world order or the Great Reset as being projects overseen by shadowy, nefarious groups, and even if they were, it's unlikely they'd succeed to any significant extent. I don't know why people gravitate towards these nebulous schemes when much of what we suffer, overconsumption, an education system designed by industrialists, a Federal Reserve owned by banks, a two-party system that consistently votes against the will and best interests of its constituents, is all stuff that is out in the open and a matter of public record, including letters, statements, and congressional records. We have the receipts, we just ignore them. But all that is for future videos, and there are many channels that deal with prepping in the material sense, so I suggest you watch those. Canadian Prepper is a good place to start, and however you feel about the thought of prepping, be apprised. The biggest prepper in the world is the US government. And all that prepping they do isn't for we, the people. It's for government employees. If you're willing to give the government money so in a catastrophe they survive and you don't, that's on you. I'm sure that's fine with them. But beyond material goods, and in my opinion more important, are the big three, in my opinion: physical health, mental fortitude, and knowledge. I'm going to focus on mental fortitude because that's the one I'm working on hardest, because it's my weakest point and it's hardest to cultivate and most difficult to maintain. You're not going to lose strength or endurance or knowledge once it's ingrained overnight. But anyone can slip into a panic or indecisiveness or be drawn up into mass hysteria unless they've consistently practiced not being that under extreme conditions. The last 2 years have shown me we are not a nation of determination and grit, but a nation of shrill, pansy-ass pussies. And while I'm not better than everybody else, I'm better than I used to be because I've been working at it. And the greatest factor of change in myself is being aware of the internal dialogue, questioning the validity or even usefulness of what I'm telling myself, and changing that if it doesn't serve me. Learning to question my thoughts led me to learning about Stoicism and deepen my understanding of Buddhism and Taoism, and to try to incorporate more mindfulness and being present, and mostly just learning to accept the vagaries of life. To sum it up simply, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That's Hamlet. And it's especially appropriate to this talk because broaching the subject of widespread societal collapse will automatically send everyone's thoughts racing in some direction. But I mean to make the point that the collapse of the style of life we're all accustomed to is not wholly or even necessarily a bad thing. It depends on one's point of view. And admittedly, this is conjecture, albeit backed by loads of evidence. So if we manage to avoid it or mitigate the worst of it, this video will be largely moot. But make no mistake about it, we are in the midst of the beginning of Novueval times, the new Dark Ages. We're degrading our environments and the very things we rely on for survival, air, water, and food, and always for things we need least, money and stuff, or to simply make the rich richer. It's been said, if you're stuck in a boat in the ocean, you don't want suitcases full of cash, you want a fishing pole and water. We're seeing a downward trend in social behavior and economic activity and political discourse. We'll examine these topics in future videos, but regardless of how bad it actually is, depending on one's opinion, or how much worse it will get, which is anyone's guess, I'd like to emphasize the importance of being fit and mentally balanced in even the best of times, and these are not the best of times. Having a network or group you can rely on to stick together, whatever comes down the pike, is an absolute necessity in worst-case scenarios, and we're already experiencing those. The wildfires out west, worsening hurricanes, the cold snap in Texas. The hope is eventually governments will step in to help out, but in the immediacy of a drastic situation, it's always better if you can help your neighbor or they can help you than counting on some possibly far away and highly politicized entity to help out. Remember how Texas responded to its citizens' plights after their cold snap and avoidable loss of power. You can't rely on government. You have to look out for yourself. And don't hope AOC or any other caring soul will come down to serve soup and fundraise. They may be stuck in a fist fight with Marjorie Taylor Greene. You're on your own. Or you develop a group and then you aren't. What I'm striving to emphasize is the healthier you are, the more well-adjusted to all of the things you have little or no control over, and the stronger the ties and larger the group of capable people you are a part of, the less concerned you will be about the health of our social and political structures, systems, and institutions. We were around for hundreds of thousands of years as Stone Age people before anything like agriculture or civilization or money came into being. And even if we dropped that low, which we won't, we could do it again. And as crude and unforgiving as primitive life may appear to most of us, indications are, if one makes it through childhood, they would live a healthier life and on average work far less hours than we do for everything they need, and there is no indication at all that we are happier or more adept at navigating reality than they were. One finding is that during and directly after the Great Depression, lifespans actually went up, and the assumption is people ate less and were more active. Something to consider. I'm pointing out these examples to drive home a point, which is the notion that we need this level of progress to be happy, that we're better off with it. These are all just fear-mongering to discourage us from even considering the question, is our present style of government and economic system even viable? And if they aren't, what's next? Our declining standard of living disproves the capitalist spiel that the graph always goes up and to the right. Since we don't know what the future holds, but it certainly doesn't look bright, I'd consider, without panic or stress, what a worst-case scenario might look like and what would one do about it. My suggestion? Prepare. Water, food, a strong mental state, a healthy body, a community of aware people without fear or drama would be a great start. Now I'd like to leave you with a few quotes I think are appropriate. Do not pray for an easy life, pray for the strength to endure a hard one. And if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And be comfortable in your thoughts while accepting discomfort instead of being uncomfortable in your thoughts while seeking comfort. And nothing any good isn't hard. I love that one. And lastly, growth is rebellion. They want you to stay small. In order for them to succeed, they need your complicity. All right, I thank you for watching, and be apprised, summer is coming. This one will be long. Gird your loins. Talk to you soon.